Hey guys, this video is over evolutionary mechanisms. Okay, we learned about natural selection as a mechanism, but we're also going to talk about four more. Okay, and we're going to talk about genetic drift, gene flow, mutation, and non-random mating. So let's go through this again. You should have this in your notes, but we know that genetic drift is just the change in the gene pool of a small population. It has to do with chance, right? This person is walking and it steps on the green beetles, right? And it reduces the population drastically, okay? And that's just by chance, okay? So, and now if we look at the new population, we see that there's only one green beetle and there's more tan beetles, and eventually that's what it's going to be. The population is going to be, or the frequency of the tan color is going to be way higher than the green because that person stepped on the green beetles, and that was just by chance. Okay, now there's two types of genetic drift. The first one is called bottleneck, and this just happens from a disaster, natural disaster, and it happens again just by chance, and it reduces the population size. Earthquakes and volcanoes, volcanic eruptions are a great example, but you can see it down here. They call it bottleneck effect because if we compare these two, right, we can see that this one has more yellow marbles than this one. Right? If we shake it up and then we pour some of those marbles into this cup, and then we look at it, we see that there's more blue ones than yellow ones. So if these marbles were able to reproduce, they would eventually get to this population, which you can clearly see is more blue than yellow. Okay. So that caused a change in the population. So that's why we call this a mechanism of evolution, because it changes the population size and it changes the alleles in the population. And this is all by chance. Okay. Another one is called founder's effect. And this one is just results from the colonization of a new location by a small number of individuals, right? Examples of this are the Darwin finches, like the ones we watched in the video. Okay, but let's just say that this population here loses one of their ladybugs, right? That ladybug goes to an island, it's attached to a boat or something, and he gets to that island and he starts reproducing. Well, now all the alleles that are going to be present in this new population are going to be only the ones that this ladybug brings, right? So, of course, that's going to create a different population, and eventually, because of pressures in the environment, this new population here might become a different species, okay? But it will change the population alleles or the alleles in the population, so it does cause evolution, okay? So that's another mechanism. The other one is gene flow, and gene flow is just the movement of an individual or the gametes from one place to another, and it's also known as migration, okay? And examples of this are pollen being blown to a new destination, okay? Maybe pollinators start changing their route, or the wind changes and just pollen gets to another population. And also people moving from city to city, or from one country to another, right? Because they move there, and if a person moves from the United States to Italy, well, he's taking himself to Italy. He's taking his alleles to Italy. So if he decides to marry somebody from Italy, his alleles or his genes are going to be introduced into the new population, and that's gene flow. Okay. The next one is non-random mating. Okay. That means that this brown bug will always always going to reproduce with a brown bug, right? So what that causes is an increase in the frequency of certain alleles, and this creates the brown allele. Okay. So the population will eventually be just brown alleles or brown bugs, because through non-random mating, that individual will always mate with brown bugs. This will not happen. This will not happen, right? So again, through non-random mating, the population will change, and it will increase the frequency of just certain alleles in that population. Okay. Another one that we need to talk about is changes in an organism's DNA, and that's mutations, right? Mutations are not always harmful. They're not always beneficial. Sometimes they could be neutral, meaning they don't do any harm or they don't do any benefit, okay? But what we need to understand is that mutations don't happen just because the organism needs something. So a mutation happens to support its needs. Mutations happen randomly. They happen by chance. And if that mutation allows the organism to survive better, then it's going to stay within in the population. If it's not, then that organism is probably not going to be able to reproduce. Okay, but what we need to remember from this is that the only mutations that matter are mutations that happen to the gametes or in the gametes of an organism, the sperm and the egg, because that's the only mutations that you can pass down to other organisms. If you have a mutation in your skin, that's a somatic cell that has nothing to do with you reproducing or creating another offspring, so those mutations are not going to be passed down. The only ones are going to be the ones in the sperm and the eggs of an organism. Okay. Natural selection, I think we already talked about natural selection, but all it is survival of the fittest, right? And that doesn't mean you got to be the fastest or the strongest. That just means you got to have the favorable traits that are selected by nature to survive better and reproduce better. And if you have those traits, then you're going to have more of a chance to survive and a higher rate of reproduction. Okay, so of course you're going to reproduce at different rates. Okay. And remember, and you can go back and watch the video of natural selection and look at your notes as well, okay, to go into more detail in this. The last thing that we'll talk about today is adaptations, okay, because of natural selection, because of mutations, because of all the mechanisms that we've been talking about, organisms are able to adapt to their environment. And all adaptations they're just features that allow an organism to function better in that environment. And if they can function better, then they're able to survive better. And if they survive longer and better than other organisms, then they're going to be able to reproduce and have more offspring. Okay, and that population will stay in that ecosystem. Okay, I gave you a chart during class for you to review over specific adaptations over 7 biomes, I believe. Okay, so look at that, review it. And if you have any more questions over mechanisms, please come by tutoring and we'll go over your questions.